When we think about connection, when we think about relationships, when we think about who do we want to know, who do we want to be, one of the places that people tend to gather is at the table. It's in the kitchens. It's at the parties. Everybody's grouped and you're like, well, wait a minute, the table's beautiful. It's over there, the fancy table. But no. People want to be in the warm spots. They want to be in the places where other people want to be. It's the pass the butter. Will you put those peanuts out on the table? Will you, fill up my beer glass? Whatever that is, at the table is such a magic place where we connect. And so if you had joined me with the Connecting Juice, which was the previous name of this show, glad you're back, glad you're here. If this is your first time, really glad you're here too. If you're watching on the recording, really glad you're here too. So here's a whole big party of really glad. So today, I'm Ginger. Well, I'm Ginger every day. And the At the Table show is designed to bring in great people, like everybody here. The guest gets the love seat. Everybody here gets to participate if you want to. So Rich Chang and I met in New Jersey. Yes, Rich is our fabulous guest, growing friend. We met in New Jersey. We were both part of a 2-day intensive speaker training. And you may know that I'm a professional speaker. That's one of my modalities. And I work the room, so to speak. I connect with the room. Here's the first lesson. Connecting isn't about numbers. Connecting is about one at a time, one-on-one. And as that first day started to unfold, it was in the morning, I believe, Rich, that we connected. And we were both standing in front of a board that said, do you need a ride to the airport? We're going to dinner. Do you want to come here? And he and I were both next to each other. And our conversation started. And like, look at this guy's smile. He's great. Why don't you want to connect with that? I sure do. Smile, universal language of like, come on over, let's have a chat. So Rich and I started talking, and it quickly became apparent to me, I hope he feels the same way, I'm like, this is a really interesting person. So we started talking, and here he is. Rich, I'm really glad you're here.
Hey, and you forgot to mention that we ended up getting up, I think, at 6 in the morning the next day to meet for coffee just to continue our conversation.
We did. How about that, right?
Mutual respect. Yeah.
Yes, and you were
just let everyone know I am not a professional speaker. I was there at that particular course to kind of learn more about what is involved in that, to help me actually just with my work, because I've been involved in a lot of different startups, and I had to do pitches sometimes in front of funders, that kind of thing. So
yeah. Definitely. Good segue, Rich, because I was going to ask, well, what is the connection here to At the Table? And Rich he's a founder of a company. He's involved in lots of different things. So Rich, give us kind of here's the storybook. What are some of the interesting, well, you've got a lot of interesting. What are some of the interesting parts of your life that have gotten you to this point?
My gosh, there's a lot of luck that's been involved. It always is interesting when I chat with folks and they just say like, oh yeah, I had everything mapped out. I'm like, there's nothing in the end that has been really mapped out. I've just been very fortunate.
Let me see that map.
Yeah. So I actually grew up in New York, fairly privileged, probably upper middle class. And then I ended up going to a school in Long Island, a very, very small school. And that again was luck, because they happened to come across my transcript, and they do naval architecture and marine engineering. So what that means is I'm supposed to be able to design a ship or a boat or whatever, right? Okay. Did that for about 2 years, and then discovered that one, I didn't really like the industry, or I didn't really like the degree. And then 2, I wasn't really seeing a lot of opportunity for jobs, because the United States is very restrictive around shipbuilding, understandably, because we're very safety oriented. That's why we have organizations like OSHA, et cetera. But it was so restricted to the point that the only thing that really gets built in the States, commercial-wise, are military ships, right? And maybe yachts, et cetera. So I try to get out, and this is kind of like the first kind of big step in, well, I don't know where my life's going to take me. I dropped out of school my junior year, basically, and parents were very happy, understandably. They didn't know how to really handle it. I mean, they were supportive, but I could tell they were pretty ticked off. Took a year off, actually worked in the field just to kind of turn into something I really wanted to do. And this is an example of at the time, it sucked, right? I'm going like, what the hell am I doing in my life? I really don't know where I'm going to be going from here.
You're what, early 20s at this point?
Oh no, I was 19 at this point. Oh, okay. Yeah, probably 19, okay. Almost 20. So I worked in the industry for a year, decided, no, I don't want to do it. Then I had a hard time figuring out how to transfer my credits to other schools. University of Michigan it turns out they had the same program, but theirs is actually a single degree, whereas my other program was dual degree. So the amount of credits I had actually transferred, and I was able to start off as a senior. So I basically
Oh,
skipped my junior year.
okay.
And I went, you know what? I can try this for a year. And then again, this is where I really started to get a more diverse view into like the world in education. Because again, I grew up pretty
Mm.
sheltered in Poughkeepsie, New York, where I grew up, child of a lifelong IBMer, went to a very
Hmm.
small school that accepted 25 students, where basically the teachers came to us, came here to Ann Arbor, and I'm like, what is this university
Wow.
experience? Wait, I have to register for classes? Like, what is this thing? I had to do it through a phone at that time. This is in '94. And then I was like, holy cow, tuition's expensive. And
Hang on, hang on. That was not like in your wheelhouse up until that point, or what?
no, because
Why?
the other school was, I don't know if I mentioned, it was tuition free to go to the other school, which is why they accept
Oh,
25 students per year, which is why I was,
oh,
I'll go
okay.
do this, it's free, right?
Sure.
And then
Okay.
you learn that sometimes free, even though it's a phenomenal, exceptional school, it sometimes isn't the best use of like to make a decision around, right? Like, is it free or not?
Sure.
Uh,
Sure.
and when I came to Michigan, I then learned about Washington Community College because I went, well, holy cow, a lot of the courses I had to take were electives.
Mm-hmm.
And I got my first experience in community college there too, because my credits transferred over to UMich, right? So it was a lot cheaper way in. And then I basically just had to take my main engineering courses at the U. When I graduated, again, I got very lucky in that I was in town for a little bit, working for a temp agency while my girlfriend at the time was finishing up her master's program. And I ended up getting hired in at the company that was started and managed the first internet public backbone, and that's how I got my foray into technology.
Okay.
And in
So
that
what
particular,
is, hang on a second. I got to interrupt you. What is an internet backbone?
yeah, so now like us talking right now through Zoom,
Mm-hmm.
it's done with these things called data packets, which basically just contain information as like the audio, text, video, pictures, whatever. And those have to traverse through basically a highway of network devices, right? They're all connected together. They call them routers.
Mm-hmm.
And what this is it's basically just like the national highway system connecting cities and towns and
Hmm.
physical locations. The internet backbone connects websites,
Interesting.
places, and things.
Okay. All
And
right.
so at
Thank you for
that
that.
time, really this is early 90s, most of the internet connectivity was more education system to education system. And this was saying like, okay, you probably remember America Online. So that was actually
Mm-hmm.
who our parent company was, because we were tasked with creating an architecture that allowed anyone from anywhere to dial in, connect, and chat with each other, access websites, etc.
Okay.
Um, and so getting into that role also helped me with a big philosophy. And again, this is by luck, because in that role, I was changing jobs very frequently
Mm-hmm.
because things were happening so fast. And so I got to experience first level troubleshooting support. Then I got promoted to second level engineering support, then third level. And then I got to do with tools, software development, QA, testing, and all those different experiences in the end have allowed me a very diverse view
Mm-hmm.
into what goes into just work, right?
Hmm.
And having those experiences also gives me a lot more empathy of understanding the challenges, the pros and cons of every role, the challenges they have, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
salespeople have different hurdles they have to go over that typically engineers won't understand, right? And the salespeople also then don't fully understand what the engineers go through. Where I've been in situations where a salesperson will go into a sales deal and they're like, "Oh yeah, all right, so you want that feature? How soon do you want it?" And the client, of course, always wants it yesterday. And they're like, "Okay, how about like a couple of weeks?" And without really understanding and checking, they're like, "Oh, that sounds great." And then they bring it back to us in engineering, and we're going, "That's like 2 months of work, right?" But the salespeople also have their driving thing around commissions, right? And so they're like, "Well, I already made the sale, I got my commission, so you guys have to figure out how to make this so we don't irritate the clients." And so that's why a lot of times there's that kind of internal fighting between different groups in a corporation, because there isn't enough diverse understanding of the challenges that each particular group has and how they actually are supposed to operate as a team.
So,
So from there, yeah, I just had a bunch of different startups, a couple very early ones that crashed and burned. Learning experiences, again
Right.
around sales and
Right.
marketing. But that's why I say like there's a
Right.
lot of luck because I was able to get through them, right? And then from there, you
Mhm.
just continue to build your muscles around how to be a person and how to be a business leader.
Mhm. I think it's so interesting, Rich, that you've used the word luck a lot. And there's a lot of effort. Luck is chance. Luck is not up to you. You kept at it, and every effort that you participated in or stepped out of, like that fuels the machine forward, right? So fast forward to today, you're the new Foundry, the company, and you're welcome to put that link in the chat. Rich, people are probably curious.
Oh, sure.
And he's active on LinkedIn too. So you can certainly go check out Rich and more of what he does. One of the reasons I invited Rich here today, in addition to already learning a bunch about like internet backbone, that's a good one. I wrote that down. Like, ooh, that's good. Hope we don't need a spinal tap. Is that when we met in New Jersey at that speaking course, one thing I learned quickly, one thing Rich shared quickly was that he's on, well, at the time you were on 11 boards, it's soon to be 10. Like, what? Who? No, this is not the right mind. Okay, I'm not either. So we're going to be good friends. Being on so many different boards, let's segue into that. Like your backbone and all your background, Rich. You're in Ann Arbor, Michigan. You are paying attention. You're invited to these boards continually. You participate. You're choosing now more. Are we still at 10, or do you have a few less?
I'm at 10 now. Yes,
Okay.
one I termed out of.
Okay. So when you're thinking about connection, and diversity has come out of your mouth, and you and I were talking a little bit before we went live on the show too, when we're talking about connection and diversity of connection, Rich, and you think about the 10 boards you're on, if you were to show us those boards, like, would we see the diversity that you envision possible to have better connections in the community?
Do you mean if I wasn't on those different boards or
No,
just?
if you were, and maybe you are the diversity. I mean, let's be really upfront here, right? In fact, you and I were talking before the show went live. Like, he looks great. He says he needs a haircut. Rich, whatever, it's your hair. It's like, but Asian hair is different. Like, oh, okay. I want to know. What about
So
that?
it's
Like,
like, I don't know what
let's
she's talking
talk
about.
about that. Yeah, I hand cut my mohawk yesterday. But anyway, let's talk about, I'm not coming out to Michigan to cut your hair because I should not be cutting anybody else's hair. But when you're looking at the boards you're on and you've been part of, and I'm guessing that several people, in fact, if you've been on a board and you're here live, throw up some sort of emoji or put something in the chat. I'd be really curious. Do you think that the boards you're on are diverse? And if so, how so? And if not, how can we all think about participating, or how to progress that diversity? And let's just start with the world of boards, because there's a lot of boards out there.
I think it really depends on the community, right? So Ann Arbor in general, in the grand state of Michigan, is fairly diverse. I wouldn't say we're perfect, but of the boards that I'm on, a lot of them have, even before DE&I became like the word of
Buzzword, right?
yeah, on the tip of everyone's tongue, they were very concerned in making sure that they try and be as diverse as they can. One of the biggest challenges they have, though, is that for a lot of boards, the folks that actually join the boards, a lot of them they're retired. And that's why I've actually decided and made it a mission to join a lot of different boards. One, as a business owner; two, as like a younger generation member of the community, to show that it can actually be done. And I'm not asking everyone to join 10 boards, just
Right.
join one or two, or even join some committees. But in particular, for me as a business owner, one of the biggest challenges and holes I see overall in community is the involvement of businesses, right? Especially business leaders and business owners. And that's a problem because we are, frankly, a big driver of the economic success and development in a particular community. And that community could be viewed as your local town, your county, your states, the coast to coast of the United States of America. Most of my work is very oriented around my particular county, which is Washtenaw County in Michigan, which is home to like Ann Arbor, Michigan, and a few other.
Has that been intentional, Rich?
Yes, because I used to have a bigger picture plan of like, I'm gonna make change coast to coast. And then you start realizing, wow, that's gonna be a huge uphill battle. And probably about 3 or 4 years ago, actually chatting with my wife Tanya, who's been heavily involved in community efforts, etc. She's like, well, maybe you just need to kind of take a step back and think a little bit smaller and be okay and happy with that. And it's been a journey for me, and I still continue to learn and evolve and figure out how I can actually be a better community member, which is actually how Phil Williams and you introduced us. He and I chatted about this because even though I feel like I have above average knowledge of DE&I still have a lot to learn, especially in regards to affecting and effecting change around that. And there are some days that I think like, oh, I think I get it. And then next day I'm going, oh my gosh, I don't even know what I'm going to do. And for these different boards, the
Wow.
main reason why I'm on a lot, because they all, like I view it as we have like this thing called the circle of care, right? So every single one of us have different various needs. And for those that are less privileged, they have the same needs, but at different levels, right? So it might be food insecurity or housing problems, etc. And all these different community organizations, they try and help folks out, but they're all, as we all know, nonprofits in general, always strapped for cash and or resources wise. And that could be money, that could be human resources. The people on their staff can only do so much. And then they also have X amount of dollars in their bucket they can actually apply. But they all try and, in my view, provide that holistic, complete coverage, because the last thing I want to do is like, oh, I provide housing services and you came to me for housing, but you also have food scarcity. Well, you need to go over there and get the help, right? That's the last thing you want to do is like take people and just try and shove them around a community to try and get all the needs that they have. And so my big thing was like, how about we all come to the table together, right? And this actually formulated out of some client work that New Foundry did very early on. We're working with a couple nonprofit organizations that focus on the environment. And when they first came to us, they're like, there's 5 of them in the same building, which is crazy. And they each got, say, like $50,000 grants. And all of us kept complaining of like, well, we can't really do a lot with $50,000. Is there ways that you can help us maybe come up with a campaign to get more donations? And we're like, wait a second. There's 5 of you all focused pretty much on the same similar thing. Combine resources, because now you have 5 times $50,000. And they're like, oh, this is great. So now they have $250,000 and they can do more. And so that was what we call the Semiwild Coalition. And so that whole idea around like, oh, if you can actually combine and bring people together like a community, you can actually have bigger impact and solve more problems together.
Right.
And so yeah, each of these different nonprofits, they deal with policy, education, community, just overall workforce pipeline. So yeah, it keeps me on my toes, but a lot of it too, it's something that's been instilled in me from my parents of community. And I think that's also something that's missing from a lot of, I think, younger generations. And there's many anecdotes, right, of a lot of people, for instance, out in the Bay Area that are millionaires and they're miserable. Right? And then when you start digging in China, it's because they just don't really understand their purpose in life. They're like, well, I have these gobs of money, but what am I doing with this? And it's like, well, you can give back to the community. I mean,
I got ideas. Let me help you with that.
yeah.
Wow, so good. So when you 10 boards, like that's a lot of investment of your own resources, Rich. How do you choose? Let's start with this, because I think I've been on boards. I've been on short terms because I realized that the board I wasn't the best fit for the board. Sometimes I love that you brought up committees. Like if you want to get involved, but you don't want to be on the board, or there's some sort of misnomer, and you're like, oh, board, that'd be a grind. Fine, go volunteer for a committee. And every country has plenty of opportunities. I think everybody here knows this. At the same time, then what holds us back? So were your parents on boards?
They were, but it was like 1 or 2.
Okay.
I think one was like the church board, and another one was like another nonprofit in the area.
Okay.
But for both of them, it also majority happened after they retired, right? So that's a pretty
Okay. So I know that the guests present here, several, if not all, are also in your zone, Rich, where we're working for a living. We're still in the workforce, so to speak. So when you think about, if you were going to say, Ginger, okay, you're in a new town, which I am. Here's how I want you to think about finding a way to volunteer with a board or to get involved to promote diversity in your community. What would be some of the advice you would give me, Rich?
Well, luckily, I think you're pretty outgoing and extroverted, so I think it'll be easier for you to just kind of walk up to people and just start talking. One of the easiest ways, of course, is most towns have a chamber of commerce.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times they have a pretty good pulse on who the who's involved in a particular
Mm-hmm.
community,
Right.
and then also what social services. And a lot of them, of course, there's United Ways that are
Mm-hmm.
typically in particular communities too.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you start unraveling those threads of just like the commonality between different communities, you can then just start chatting with them. And a lot of times it's around asking like, hey, what are your needs beyond just like financial donations? Because I think that's the
Sure.
reason why a lot of folks get afraid to chat with them. They're like, oh no, if I start reaching out to these folks, they're going to put me on some call lists and there's going to be counting
Oh,
for money. And that's
sure.
one thing that we're always trying to reiterate is that the money is helpful, but that's not the main thing for us. Because in the end, we're around, most of these nonprofits, it's around educating the community so they understand the needs of the people in the community, because every community is different. And
Right.
then how do you have those conversations to try and approach it of like, well, how can I be a part of the solutions to solve
Mm,
the problems that they're facing?
yeah.
Well, a lot is going
Yeah.
to be around communications, and some folks might be surprised, but I'm actually extremely introverted. But I have come up with coping mechanisms to get me out there to actually have conversations. And it's not that I don't like being in like group situations, like in a boardroom sitting or even committees. It's
Mm-hmm.
just when I have to join like a large group of people that I don't really know is when I start questioning like, oh gosh, do I really want to do this? But that's also part of the reason why I joined a lot of these boards was to kind of help me get out of that shell, and really start learning some skills
Mm-hmm.
on, frankly, conflict resolution and problem solving. And then two, enabling myself to actually be in uncomfortable situations where I can actually have conversations now and not have sweaty palms and sweat pouring down my forehead from being.
Indeed.
Yep, I'll
It's
definitely.
it's interesting that the vert status is an interesting. It's an interesting word we use for ourselves, right? I tend to actually, I'll be really frank. It really annoys me when people are like, oh, well, I'm an introvert. I can't do that. Like, I'm loving up the people, but I'm thinking, let's rethink that, because where you give yourself and where you stay with yourself is entirely up to you. And so the vert status in a way doesn't matter. You just said it right there, Rich. Like, this is how what I would extrapolate, and maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. I'm sure you'll tell me, Rich, is I prefer to have either smaller groups or be more introspective than go to new groups where I don't know anybody, because there's all kinds of things swirling around there. Now, that's probably oversimplified. Here's the news flash, y'all. Anybody who knows me in this room or watching this show, like, yeah, I'm energetic. I need tons of me time. I need the quiet time. So the vert status, if you want to use that, fine. Don't use it as a crutch though. Just like we don't want to say, oh, it's a nonprofit. I'm just a nonprofit. Oh, come on. Really? Like, the IRS cares about that, and I'm not the IRS.
Yep.
So think about it. I know we have some great people in the room right now while we're filming this live. You're doing amazing work in communities where there is nonprofit structure and there is for-profit structure. The biggest think, and Rich, tell me what you think about this. The biggest think is that you've got to bring in the resources. That's a perfect word that you used before. You've got to bring in the resources, people, money, blah, 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 in order to progress the mission. Just like your 5 with 50, all of a sudden, whoo, that mission, boom, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so the stuff that I join these different boards, like it's COCO for short, stands for Coordinated Community, because I want to facilitate them actually working more hand in hand with each other so that their resources, again, money and staff, is better utilized around in the area that they're actually the expertise in, right?
Right.
And
Right.
around the introvert extrovert, yeah, I mean, I definitely prefer being in smaller groups.
Mhm.
But Larry actually had posed a question like, what are my coping mechanisms? And again, this ties into my continual approach to life of just like always be improving, always be learning.
Mm.
And I reflect very often about things that happen in our life, and I go, oh, what did I learn from that? And very early on, so New Foundry's been in business about 10 years now. But one of my roles as CEO is to do business development, which means I'm supposed to be getting out there and talking with people. And I got invited to this event where I think there was going to be like 50 other folks in the community, and a friend that was going to that was like, you should come to this. I think it'd be really helpful for you. And I remember driving over the highway that normally if I got head home, I would turn onto this highway and go home, driving over the bridge
Ah.
and going, it's 6 p.m., it's after the workday, maybe I'll just go
Mhm.
home, right? But instead, I forced myself to go to this event. And as a result of this, I look back, and if I hadn't gone to that event, I frankly would
Mhm.
probably not be on a lot of these boards, because one of the people I met on there is the reason why I started joining different boards. And the
Ooh.
coping mechanism that I used or forced myself at that particular event was like, okay, I'm going to this event. There's gonna be a ton of people because I know no one here. But if I make one good, decent connection beyond just like, hey, what do you think of the weather today? Or how about the Detroit Lions? They probably lost another one, right? It's actually having a deep conversation, and it doesn't necessarily have to be around work. I will pretty much talk about anything with anyone, even if we have differing views. That's always been something very easy for me. But if I make one deep connection, then I give myself permission to either leave, or I can stay and continue chatting with others.
And do
And
you
since then, I've had events where I make that one connection. I'm like, peace out, I'm gone. And I've had other ones where I'm actually really enjoying this. I think I'll just chat some more. And next thing I know, I'll have two or three more people. And
Yeah.
now I've actually joined a bunch of different organizations. I joined Vistage a while back, and then Entrepreneur Organization recently. And those are situations where you're getting in front of groups of people that you really don't know. I just had an event yesterday for EO, and there was 20 of us that went out afterwards. Probably 10 years ago, I would have done that. And I'm like, okay, the training's over, or the meeting is done. I'm out. And I actually went and had a really good time chatting with people. And then in the end, we may actually have some business development out, because there's a gentleman I was chatting with that he heard what we
Mhm.
did and he went, oh, you know what? I think you guys can actually help me out with this. So that's what I talk about, like the luck piece. If I
Mm.
hadn't forced myself to do that, we wouldn't have this potential opportunity to now even get to work with someone else with a business engagement.
Interesting. Yeah. Connection is a domino that you can tip, and it's totally in your control. I love that you, I thought a word nerd, I'm picking up a lot of the specifics. You say, I forced myself to keep going. We can call that whatever we want. Like, okay, I made the decision. I'm going to show up for myself. Reliability. If anybody's read The CEO Next Door, that book, the number one quality that a board looks for in a CEO is reliability. So just like you wanted to be reliable for yourself, Rich, like I said I was going to go to this thing, so I'm going to go to this thing. I'm going to show up. That's a practice, right? And you alluded earlier, like, keep working the muscle, because
Mhm.
that's what builds that strength. When you find yourselves in those moments, Rich, where you're at the event, there's new people, so to speak, and you've made your one connection, which, for the record, for everybody watching this, absolutely something I encourage too. Like, you go to an event, there's 100 people, you want to meet one person, what are your odds? 100%. You go to an event, there's one other person, you want to meet one other person, what are your odds? 100%. Choose one person. Don't get lost in the miasma of everything and so forth, and focus in. So do you find yourself in those moments, Rich, where you're in a group with new people and you've made one connection where you're feeling good and so forth? How often would you guess, roughly, do you say, oh, this is fun, or there's something either subconscious or conscious saying, that was good, or that was easy, or that felt safe, I'm going to make another one? How often do you suppose that happens for you?
More often than not now, and part of it is because Southeast Michigan isn't that big, and I've been in this community since '94.
Mm,
Nowadays, it's fairly rare for me to go to some of these
mm,
events and not know someone there nowadays.
mhm.
And so, because of that, but that's also a benefit of forcing myself to do something I was very uncomfortable with,
Right.
because in the end, it's difficult in the beginning, but then it grows easier because now I have a
Yes, it
much
does.
wider network, and it
Right.
isn't like shallow discussions, right? That got me to
Mm,
that point. It was
right.
actually, like I said, having deep, meaningful conversations with folks that when they see me, hopefully they go, oh, hey, there's Rich. I won't have to small talk, right? We'd actually dive
Yeah.
into something fun because
Right.
I mean, I'm not unique. I'm sure there's other people at these events that are in the same kind of boat as me and going like, oh, geez, like, do I really want to be here right now? And then hopefully there's some joy if they see me walk through. They're like, oh, cool. Someone that one I know, and then two, someone that I can talk with something about this event or some other topic or whatnot, and
Right.
actually turn around into something that they enjoy.
Right. Right. Is there are I have my own opening questions, and I love that you shared. And it's small talk. We're giving small talk a bad name, y'all, because what we don't want to do is have banal talk. We don't want to have empty talk. We want to have talk that's meaningful, and that's one unfortunate misnomer. Like, I'm going to go, they're going to be watered down cocktails and be chit chat. It's not going to mean anything, and I'm going to waste another hour of my life I'm never going to get back. So, Rich, what's one question you like to open up? You probably have a variety, but what's one question? There's people in this room right now that I'm quite certain you haven't met before, which I would encourage you, all great people. If you walked into the room and you met Leslie or you met Debbie or you met Becky or anybody in here, what's an opening question that you like to use that helps put people at ease, that can kickstart a meaningful conversation?
One of my favorites. So one of my favorite approaches to just questions in general is like talk about something, right? So talk about a time when. But one of my
Mm.
favorite lead-ins to just conversations is asking people what they view as basic life skills, right? So for me, for example, they'll be like, well, what do you mean by that? I'm like, well, I think people should be required to learn how to ride a motorcycle or how to drive a semi-trailer. Or for me, sometimes one other one's just like, hey, do you think it's fair to judge someone based on how they bag their groceries? Right. And then that gets in the conversation. It's like, wait, what are you talking about? Like, well, I have some friends, people that I know that put the bread at the bottom of the paper bag, right? And I think I should be able to judge them because I think that's like, to me, that doesn't fit logic and it seems absurd. And then another conversation starter that I use is like, is it fair to judge someone based on how they walk down a sidewalk? Because frankly, for me, that actually, I view that actually as a really good gauge into how someone actually views themselves in the world of society, right? Because
So
I think we've all had
fascinating.
it. In particular for me, it happens a lot because I'm in Ann Arbor, which is a college town, and there's a lot of kids walking around a sidewalk, and there'll be a group of them, and you'll be you, and they won't move out of the way, right? They're just like, I'm going to take up the whole thing right now. And you're going, you know what? If you're more aware, exactly. And to me, that shows like a lack of empathy and a lack of awareness. And so I've been wanting to have like a research study based on it. It's like, okay, well, is this a fair statement for me to say like, if you walk this certain way down a sidewalk, you're either a really nice person or you're a jerk. I don't know, but I think so. It's turn into a PhD research project, right?
We could do some informal research. Everybody find a crowded sidewalk, find maybe a college or a campus. Isn't that funny? You know what I do? I do in those. That's so great. I love that. Is it fair to judge? Which is a whole other episode for another time, because judging is woo sticky wicket, right? But I love what basic life skills do you think people should have? I'm gonna use that one. That's gonna be my Chang in the pocket.
I like it.
Rich, there's so many great things. And if anybody here watching live or after the fact recorded, if you have an opening question you like to ask, please go ahead and put that in the comments or the chats, because the more we share with each other, the more like, oh yeah, that's an interesting question. And now y'all want to have conversations with each other. So we're just about to the end of our program today at the table. So glad you're all here. Rich, thank you for making time in Ann Arbor, and your 10 boards and your company you're running, your wife, your race cars, all this kind of stuff. You're going to have to ask about race cars some other time. Rich,
Yeah.
here's my closing question. If you could have anybody at your table, alive or deceased, who would you love to invite to your table?
Is there a limit to how many people I can have at my table?
Well, no, go ahead.
Well, for me, it would actually be everyone that's currently on this Zoom room because I think you all have probably very unique
You're not
stories.
pandering to the crowd,
Uh,
are you?
no, I'm not. I seriously, I love meeting people.
Okay, let's have
Uh,
a dinner party at your place then.
yeah, for sure. I mean, luckily, I've been fortunate to meet Phil already and have conversations with him, and Bill too, and you and Larry, of course. But like everyone else, I'm going, I want to hear these stories and what
Mm,
actually prompted them to even join this conversation and
mm,
listen to me just babble basically. But the other is, in addition, I want to bring my wife to the table because I just really enjoy having conversations with her, and she's really truly the smart one in this family. And I've learned a lot, not only just knowledge wise, but also just about myself through that journey that I've had with her.
So good. So good. Rich, what a pleasure. I can't wait till we're in the same room again.
Same.
Thank you for making time to be at the table. Thank you everybody who's here today for being at the table. We're going to stop the recording as we go out today. And if you want to stick around for a few minutes for some table talk, you're welcome to. If you need to go and get into the rest of your day, we're grateful you were here, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks for joining, everyone. So appreciate it.
Thank you.